Should audiences be ambushed with animated gospel presentations to a dog? What do we do when celebrities get baptized? And speaking of animation, there is a forthcoming animation movie about the life of Christ from the writings of Charles Dickens. All that and more on this week's episode of Faith and Pop Culture.
Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 8 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined at the desk, as I always am, by the alien architect to my Egyptian pyramid, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Oh, not too much, Daniel. I could go deep in some Egyptian pyramids and
But
alien.
the short version is it was clearly aliens, right?
Obviously.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
We're on the same page.
we have some synergy there, and I hopefully we'll have some synergy and some agreement, some harmonizing on some of the topics this week, because this is it could be a jam-packed show. There are some interesting kind of conversations, including one that I might need you to sort of talk me through, some real-time therapy as I get some stuff off my chest. But hey, we're excited for you guys to join us once again, just to look at, hey, what's going on in pop culture this week, kind of, the trends, the stories, the controversies, the questions, and how can we as Christians not only be present in the culture, but also be thoughtful, engaged, kind of intentional with how we navigate some of these questions, and just try to shine a light for Christ in the culture. So we got some interesting stuff to get into this week. So why don't we start off right away with one that I might need just some help working through. So the kind of the big release, which we'll get into, I'll mention a bit of my thoughts on it later in this episode, but kind of, a notable movie that released just last week is Unsung Hero, kind of the faith-based film that was made by kind of the very popular For King and Country, kind of pop, Christian pop duo. And I think the movie's actually done well. I think it's
I think I saw it was number 2 at the box office.
Yeah, I think it's had success. And again, short version, I thought it was a good movie. I liked it. Check out my review. But it seems like a lot of people have been enjoying this movie. But there was something that I wasn't expecting for this movie, which I think, is maybe me just making a big deal about nothing. But I do think perhaps there are some questions that, kind of some bigger questions about this. So I'm sitting in the theater, got to see this movie a couple days early, and the trailers stopped early before this movie. I was sort of kind of feeling relieved that usually you get about 30 minutes of previews, and this thing stopped at 15 minutes. So hey, this is my lucky day. Praise Jesus. But it turns out that they weren't going to go straight to the movie. There's sort of some preamble. And even had a little countdown clock of the movie starts in 15 minutes. And they had several things. They had some of the the For King and Country, the musicians and the creators come on and share about Compassion International ministry, and I kind of encourage people to align with that. And kind of another thing that that played before this movie was sort of digging into the old Pixar playbook, kind of an animated short. I think it was branded as From the World of Jesus Revolution, and it's it's probably 6-7 minutes, definitely no more than 10 minutes of this kind of cartoon short of a guy, and he has his dog with him. They're sort of these hippies, and they're driving their bus, and they get to a bridge, and the bridge is out, and they can't get across, and they got to figure out how to get across. And ultimately, it seems like this leads to some pretty low-hanging fruit metaphors for the gospel. That like this bridge being out, so too did our sin separate us from God. And kind of this, through this short, the character sort of gives the gospel presentation to the dog, and then kind of breaks the fourth wall, and kind of turns to the audience, and any of you in the audience, need Jesus, and kind of walks you through essentially this gospel prayer. With every eye closed and head bowed, will you repeat these words? And I'll admit, okay,
knowing you, Daniel, there's nothing that you love more than animated shorts that are sprung upon you right before something, completely unrelated to the movie you're about to see, and a good old gospel presentation. I just know that's deep down. You're like, hey, this is awesome.
I know. I was hoping for it.
They're evangelizing. It's not just a movie. It's movie and the gospel.
Because it should be, again, before we get too far into this, let me just establish that I am pro sharing the gospel. I'm not.
Good to know.
I don't want this to be taken as like, my problem is Daniel thinks we need to share the gospel less, just tell less people about Jesus. That's the way to. That's not my issue with this. I think I just sort of, as I was watching this, I felt almost kind of uncomfortable with it, like. And I was trying to wrestle, like, again, then the movie starts and my brain is elsewhere, but just trying to think through of like, why don't I like this? Like, there's something about this sort of gospel short, thing that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, well, so let's unpack that, Daniel. So I wasn't there. I didn't see this. I've only gone based on what you've told me. But you've had some time now, some distance from this little animated short. It was so encouraging to your heart. What do you think it was about it that made you uncomfortable?
So I think, you being my therapist in this, I feel like again, I don't want to make too big of a deal of like in a vacuum. I think this is whatever. I don't think it's necessarily moving the dial for good or for bad either way. But at least to me, I think part of why I was sort of felt like, why are we doing this? Like, kind of why? Like, again, like I agree with the message they're sharing, but is that I feel like it, in some ways, like almost reflects or like encapsulates just what I think are sort of not helpful views of like the arts and like the role of the arts and like how do we kind of use creativity and storytelling and to communicate these truths. And to me, it almost reflected what I feel like has been a tendency with faith-based stuff since really the beginning of at least like the modern faith-based stuff of kind of like almost trying to force like art to look like Sunday morning church. Like we're sort of comfortable with the evangelistic spiels and like this need to not let art and stories like speak on their own, but that like we also gotta like before the movie might be a bit subtle for you, even though it's about Jesus and miracles and stuff, but like so before we get there, let's make it very clear like that you get what we're putting down, like.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel like there's this thing about that it's sort of like, hey, good message, but like, is that the right time or place to sort of spring that on people that aren't necessarily there to hear that?
Yeah, there's also this sort of what sort of ambushed uh, methodology behind this as well. It's like you're coming to see a movie. It's a faith-based movie, so you might feel that there's going to be some faith-based stuff in it, but to sort of ambush people beforehand and be like, and it sounds like a very like cheesy presentation of the gospel.
I mean, what it reminded me of, I don't know if this was your experience growing up, like I feel like a lot of 90s people will get this, but like how a lot of churches used to do, like usually before like mid music, they'd like call the kids up. Did your church ever do that? Like, they'd sort of give like a kid's sermon within the larger church. I don't know if that was a.
I don't know that.
I know a lot of churches used to like, and then oftentimes they would send them off to like their kids programs and stuff. But like they would come up and sort of interrupt the service, and like the preacher would give like a very like appropriate for their age group sort of sermonette, and then they would kind of go up. That's kind of what this felt like. It's sort of like the movie itself isn't like for kids. Like I think it's a family movie, but it's like the animated thing felt like this is for like 5-year-olds.
Yeah. So why do you like, because I have a hard time, I mean, I guess I don't have a hard time, but why do you think that this got greenlit to be involved in, like, why, like, what do you think the motivation was behind this?
I mean, okay.
I mean, there's like, I guess the obvious, like, well, we want more people to know about Jesus, which that's,
yeah, I don't think the heart is in the wrong. Like,
yeah.
I would assume the heart's in the right place. Like, hey, we have an opportunity. We have a platform. We don't want to let that go by without sharing Jesus. Like, I feel like that's the motivation. I feel like what influences the way they do it is sort of this idea of conflating like sort of the power of art with just sort of church. Like that, hey, we need to sort of like, which is why I think why you get such preachy faith-based films a lot of times. Like we almost the idea that like, art is just sort of a vehicle for our message.
Yeah.
Rather than like allowing art to sort of speak on its own and like allowing the emotions of the story without having to like check the box of like, but we also share Jesus. Like,
yeah. Well, that tends to be a very sort of just simplistic um, tendency, I think, of a lot of faith-based stuff. It's like we put on this, uh, you know, we did I don't know, like a what is it, like a block party or something. It was a lot of fun, but there was a point in there where one of the pastors got up and like shared the gospel. You do a medical mission trip or something, and it's like there's a point, the gospel gets shared. So it's almost like, and again, that's good. Like we want to share the gospel, but it is very much like this is a box we tick at every function that we're a part of.
Because
And
even church functions, because like I've been to some, and like I know, if it's like a father son outing or whatever, and it's like there's an activity and you're like fellowshipping with your kids, like almost inevitably there's also like, and we're gonna have Jeff come up and share a few
yeah,
thoughts, and it's like, okay, that's fine, but sort of like, is there not good that is coming from building up fathers and sons? Like, do we need to have
yeah.
sort of an unrelated, like, also give a little devotional?
It's almost as if you can't have like a church function without there being some sort of like message at some point in
Which I feel
the
like is
thing.
is being carried over to film, where it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
hey, this, because like, and here's why I don't think it's, um, like I don't think it's a nothing thing. I do think it might not be a huge deal, maybe I'm like overreacting to it, but like I feel like it does set the tone for the movie. Like,
Yeah.
because even me, like Unsung Hero was a movie that I knew it was faith based. I'm a Christian, like, so I wasn't like antagonistic towards it, but I wasn't necessarily excited. I was like, I don't know what to expect from this, and like as I'm watching sort of this cartoon, very kind of contrived, simplistic gospel presentation, like there's a thought in my mind of like, oh, it's this kind of faith-based film. Like this is what it's
Yeah.
gonna be. I'm in church now. Like I'm gonna get preached to. The film, which like the film isn't that. Like the film Unsung Hero, it's very faith-based, and the characters are praying, and there's miracles and stuff. But like I never felt like in the film that it's like, okay, here's the scene where the characters are talking and they kind of look to the camera and like, and God can, take us through the wilderness and like sort of preaching to the audience,
Yeah.
where I feel like, sort of this like animated short, like I'm not sure anyone is like one cartoon dog away from faith. Like I don't know how many people are impacted positively.
Yeah.
Again, if any are, then like that's we should praise that. But like I'm not sure that this is sort of the kind of presentation that's going to like, oh, like now it makes sense. Like, the dog
Yeah.
could get across the bridge. I need to give my life
I
to.
am that dog.
But I do think it can almost do the opposite of like,
Right.
it puts you on the defensive of like, okay, this isn't storytelling anymore. This is church. Like this is
Yeah.
messaging. This is sermon. And I feel like someone, again, I can get over it because like I already believe what they're trying to tell me, and I've been a Christian for decades at this point. Like, but if someone isn't, and they're just like, hey, this is a movie about sort of musicians and like a family movie, and like I feel like they go into that story, and it almost like dilutes the power of the story
Yeah.
because you're seeing it through the perspective of like, okay, the church is just trying to preach to me again.
Well, and I think it also undercuts whatever messaging is in the story, is in the movie, because it's in a way it's saying we don't trust the art that we've made to do an adequate job of sending the message that we wanted to send. So we're going to like preload the art with this sort of preamble that we're going to give you, just, so that we know that we've checked all the boxes. We know our conscience is clear, whatever the motivation is there. And I just think it undermines, I think, whatever it is you're trying to do with that artwork. And I think it is a general lack of trust in art to do what it can do for people. And it's like there's this uneasiness that like, well, so we're gonna just have a movie and people are just gonna like watch it and then leave and talk about it. Like, yeah, but what about like an altar call, or what about the full gospel presentation, or oh, we're gonna have like a block party. Well, what if somebody leaves and there's like this almost panic you can sense.
Well, it's like you have to, yeah, it's like you have to cover all your bases. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this movie might inspire people and like, encourage them to see God's miracles in their own life, but we also have this opportunity to like, if they're not a Christian, we got to speak to them, and then if they are a Christian, we got to point them towards this ministry, and we got to like almost like we need films and like art to do so much more than just
be good
be a
films and art.
film,
Yeah.
like be art. And I feel like that's what I think kind of rubbed me with this. Of just,
Yeah.
I feel like we need to, like, as Christians, become more comfortable with this allowing film. And again, like, no one film has to do all that stuff. Like, have a very like evangelistic film, have that out there. If this film's not, that's okay. If this film just builds up families, like, we can offer good to the world beyond having to make sure we kind of check everything down the list of like,
Yeah. But it seems, and I guess the other thing too is it's that to me it feels very kind of corporate salesy. Like I don't know if you've ever done one of those like you get like a really good deal on a hotel, but you got to like sit through a timeshare like presentation. But and I'm not saying that that's exactly what this is, but it kind of feels like that. It's like we know you're here for this thing, but let us just get through this presentation and just to see, if any of this stuff we're talking about is resonating with you, and it's sort of adjacent to the thing that you're there to see. And so I don't know, that to me, again, I didn't see it, but based on your comments about it, it's like,
and you can usually take what I
feels,
say about it.
I know. I mean, it is the
that's,
gospel
yeah.
essentially. And so, yeah, it just feels kind of, there's an ick factor, I think, with that.
Yeah. And maybe that's
that
what
sort of
I would
approach.
end with that. It's just like, I feel like there's there's a time and place. And I feel like we treat films sometimes different than we do, like, the sense like, hey, we can't waste, God gave us this platform. We got to evangelize,
Yeah.
which we just don't do. We don't treat other things that way. Like if you're a doctor, it's not like, well, all I did was heal this person's broken bone. Like, and do you also need to like start, before I give you your cast, like, let me tell you about my friend Jesus. Like, or if you're like a plumber or you can mow someone's yard and you can make their yard beautiful, like you're adding good to the world and your community. And it's not like that's valuable without having to like baptize it every single time. And like, not that you don't, if God gives you the opportunity,
Right.
like you share, but yeah, like you said, there is some sense of like, this wasn't earned. This was like sprung on you because they could.
Yeah.
I just don't know if that's the right approach. But hey, it might be hard to believe, but sometimes I have wrong opinions. So if you guys don't,
You are but one voice in a
I'm
sea
one
of
voice,
people.
a very often correct voice, I might say. But if you guys have other thoughts on that, again, we'd love to hear just other perspectives. If you were maybe more moved by it than I was,
Or if you saw this movie and this wasn't, like, it'd be interesting too if this animation thing was that in all theaters or was it?
yeah, which is important. I did see this like an early screening.
Were you the lucky one?
I was picked out to, which again, if that is the case, there's almost bothers me more, but we won't get into that. But speaking of animated kind of evangelistic shorts and movies, kind of our next topic is that I'm actually quite excited to discover that there's a new animated faith-based film hitting theaters.
I know. Who knew?
See, hey, I'm not just totally grumpy about this stuff, but this is, again, I don't think we need to like, discuss like all, a bunch of implications. I just think it's kind of interesting, and like I hadn't heard about it, so I thought I kind of shared that I just kind of stumbled upon an upcoming movie which is called King of Kings, which is kind of based on the life of Charles Dickens and kind of his. Perhaps his like least known published works, The Life of Our Lord, which sort of the quick backstory of that is like this was essentially Charles Dickens, arguably the greatest writer who ever lived, like kind of writing the gospel story in like very simplistic language for his family. And like at Christmas, he would read, this story, and like every year they would read it, and it was kind of this like family secret. Like he didn't want it to be public, published or whatever, like until they were all gone. Something like after he died, and like after like the last of his kids died, eventually this story was made.
Oh wow!
It was made more public, and it's out there, and so kind of based on that book, there's like an animation studio that is kind of turning that into this faith-based thing, and it just looks super charming. Like the animation that they've shown for it's like I forget the name of the studio. It's based in
Mopac.
It's like based in South Carolina or Korea. Kind of like it seemed like it's sort of like it's sort of an unknown place and creators and but the people involved.
Mopac animation, I think.
Okay, yeah. and like some of the screenwriter for did the screenplay, Rob Edwards, wrote Treasure Planet, an underrated Disney gem from back in the day. And like I think they just announced like a Kenneth Branagh Academy Award winning nominated Shakespearean actors like the voice of Dickens, and like
Gotta
Uma
love Kenneth
Thurman
Branagh.
is like gonna voice his wife. And I don't know, this thing about this,
It
like,
looks good.
it's like, hey, this looks interesting.
Yeah, the animate like the little bit of animation that I've seen, the style of it looks really cool, and I think it could be a really neat movie.
Which, if you're watching our video version, you can see I brought my own.
You do have a copy.
I do have I'm a Dickens guy, which is probably why this story kind of drew me in. But I do think not to like that I feel like I need to defend myself, but I feel like this is very different than like sort of the gospel short. Like this, very clearly a faith-based thing in children, but like feels more earned. Like it.
Well, again, I think it goes back to the like ambushed nature of the thing that played before the movie you came to see. Like, I think if you want to have an animated short or an animated movie about a gospel presentation to a dog, like you could do that, release that, people can watch it or not. But if you just slap it in there in front of something else that you paid for to see, that feels a little bit cheap.
Yeah.
So I think this is totally.
And I think for me too, again, I'm a huge Dickens fan. And it's kind of a reminder too that I feel like we think of faith-based as like, I mean, I haven't done like a historical deep dive, but I feel like most people, almost like kind of the first like Sherwood Pictures films, like that's sort of when like faith-based, at least when like films, like we started making Christian stories. Like that's what a lot of people think of. But like guys like Dickens, like a lot of these, like Jane Austen, like the Christians have been telling stories and like taking different approaches to how they do that, for hundreds of years. So I'm excited for this. It's sort of like combining both of those, like a modern animation, but going back to like Victorian era to get some like the content for that. And I don't know. I'm excited. There's no like release date for it. I'm assuming.
I thought I saw 2025, but I could be mistaken.
Okay, that would
sometime next year.
I would assume probably around Christmas time, based on like that's the book source material. They would read it at Christmas time.
So and it looks like maybe it's going to be kind of a blending of like. Maybe it's Dickens taking his son or his kids into this world that he's reading. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but it seems like there's a lot of interesting
from the
things.
art. It almost seems like they'll be like kind of reading this story, and then like they'll kind of go into that, and like interact with. And I think it's also just a reminder too that like we can tell like faith-based like Jesus stories in creative ways that aren't just like. The Bible stories, like like we have to tell about David, or we got to tell about the disciples. Like there's a lot of interesting ways to do that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this movie. And if you guys weren't familiar with that, could you guys Google it, check out some of the animation for that. Kind of another big story thing that's going on that I think just happened like yesterday at least when we're recording this is the comedian turned actor turned influencer turned spiritual guru, a man of many talents, Russell Brand. He's been in the news for a lot of different reasons over the last couple of years, but making headlines this week because he kind of joins a long string, it seems, of recent like celebrities to get dunked in the tub, get baptized.
Yeah.
So he just posted a video on his on his Instagram where he shares that he was baptized, like that he. He's been on this sort of journey, and that he sort of took, the literal plunge to be baptized. And
yesterday, I got baptized, and it was an incredible, profound experience. And many of you will have had your own experiences of baptism, and will therefore know what I'm talking about. Many aspects of it were very intimate and personal. The truth is this: as a person that has in the past taken many, many substances and always been disappointed with their inability to deliver the kind of tranquility and peace and even transcendence that I always felt I've been looking for, something occurred in the process of baptism that was incredible, overwhelming, literally overwhelming, because I was obviously underwater and it was the River Thames at some points. So I felt changed, transitioned.
I don't know. There's some interesting stuff about kind of about that and like about this video, but I think this bird's eye perspective, it is interesting how many it seems like, like Kat Von D, like, recently the tattoo artist was baptized, and Hulk Hogan, the wrestler, was
Yeah.
baptized. Like, I feel like we sort of think of like Hollywood, the entertainment industry and stuff as like sort of the epitome of like godlessness. But it seems like there's been a lot of activity of people like
Yeah.
stepping out and like being baptized and stuff. But kind of your initial thoughts on this
Yeah, I
event.
mean, part of me is not really surprised that he did this. It seems that he's kind of been on this trajectory for several years now, and I think he probably mentions that in the video as well, or at least in other videos that he has sort of. It seems like he's always been a bit of a seeker in that sense, and so I don't think it's necessarily surprising, and it's also I don't think surprising. It just seems that I don't know if he's like plugged into a church or if this is just like I'm just getting baptized, but I'm not necessarily part of a local church. And so I think it's very much on brand, I think, for the way maybe that he did this. And but yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting.
Because he's very
sure.
much, at least recently, it seems like a very like spiritual person. Like I think
Yeah.
he's sought sort of to satisfy. Like in the video, he talks about how he's partaken in various substances over the years, and like just being left disappointed by that they didn't bring him peace, or like even like he said, like sort of this desire he has for transcendence.
And if anyone has sort of like tasted of the world to see what satisfies, like I think he probably has the widest palette of what the world has to offer, and yet he still comes up
Because I think he's even
empty.
dipped in his toes into like Buddhism, like some other religions and
Yeah.
stuff. And sort of like he's clearly been seeking for something, and it seems like in this video that he has kind of found that. Like he describes sort of the experience of his baptism, sort of being like overwhelming, and like this sort of
Yeah.
this almost like hard to put into words, like kind of change that he felt within him. Kind of the side sort of discussion to whenever sort of the celebrity conversions
Yeah.
can be I don't know if tricky is the right word, but like they can be
Complicated?
yeah, like there's a lot to it, and I
Maybe.
feel like it draws lots of different emotions of like as Christians, like how do we respond to some of this? Like
Yeah.
you get very different kind of like the two ends of the the boxing ring. Like you have the very hardened, cynical of like he became a Christian. Like
Yeah.
he says he did, but like
Likely story.
yeah, check back with me in 3 years, see if you're really a Christian. Like,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
this like like guilty until proven innocent kind of thing of
For sure.
just to sort of doubt because they're famous or because of what they've done that we know of, and so you sort of have that side of it, and then kind of the other extreme is the like very quick to like, oh, this guy, he's famous and he's a Christian, like let's get him on like the speaking tour, and like he's the spokesperson now, he's our champion. Like
Yeah.
he's a cool guy, he's famous, he has lots of followers, like so now and I feel like there's dangers with both of those approaches.
Definitely. And I think it's just a weird thing. And it's obviously I feel like a relatively new phenomenon just with how accessible some of these celebrities are now, and how I think it's just a byproduct of the public nature of their life. And so whatever they do, whether it's to be baptized or if they are divorced or whatever, it's kind of out in the open. And so it does present a very different approach, I feel like, that most Christians have towards someone who is very public and has a very public baptism or profession of faith or what have you. And so I think we tend to treat it very differently than just say if he came to our church and was just a regular guy who came from a rocky past and was baptized, and okay, great. Like we treat that very differently than we do someone who's like very famous, very public, and I think it's partly I just don't know that people know how to.
Because we almost like
treat
in our
that.
church context, like a local church context, we almost avoid both the extremes. Like I don't think we have the same level of like, like, hey, Bill, who's just like a visitor to the church, we've never seen the guy. He goes forward and proclaims that he's given his life to Jesus. Like, I don't know if many people have the same default cynicism of like, oh,
No,
but like, did Bill give his life?
I don't know,
Like,
Bill. That's the
yeah,
first time I've met him. Like,
like prove it. Like, I feel like our in that context, like we celebrate, like, hey,
yeah,
this guy, like, this is good news.
it's default belief, I think, in the local context. It's default skepticism, maybe, in like the public.
Yeah, it's like the reverse. And I feel like the other side of that too, we do the same thing. Where like, if someone does give their life to Jesus and like, and they start, sharing their views and stuff, like we do question a bit. Like, we want to disciple them and like, well, like, are you understanding this? Like, we don't necessarily put them up on stage the next week to like, or send them on the, start give them a book deal or something. Like, like it's
Yeah.
not like we want to make them the spokesperson. It's like, okay, no, you need to work through this stuff. It's disciple you. It's, not that you don't like share what God's done, like in your own personal connections, but like,
Yeah.
you don't need to sort of be the new champion that like we send out on behalf to fight our battles. Like, where with a famous person, I feel like there is, like, we did that to like Chris Pratt or Jason or Justin Bieber, like all these people where it's like,
Yeah.
because they're famous, like, immediately, oh, we found out you were a Christian, like, get out there and like,
Yeah.
sort of represent us. And
You're fighting for us now, and like, yeah, go win all of our cultural battles.
because like there is stuff with even his video. Again, I don't want to be one of those things of like the guessing game of like, but is he saved? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
but just like there's things about the way he describes like baptism and faith that I would have questions for. Like, it seems
Yeah.
very much sort of this like heightened emotional experience. And like, I don't know if he really has brought a whole lot of, at least in this video, I think in some other stuff he has like, like where does Jesus fit into that? Like, where does, like what does it mean to follow Jesus, not just,
Yeah.
have this sort of transcendent experience in the water. Like, and I feel like some of that is healthy, especially because again, like no, like the Bible's clear, like, when one person gives their life, one person's found, like there's rejoicing, like,
Yeah.
like no person, one life is any more valuable, but it is different when someone has a massive platform,
Yeah.
because like what they say just reaches more people. Like,
Yeah.
if they, which is why I don't think it's wrong for Christians to treat it a little different or like give it a bit more thought than they would about just like, some person in the small town that came up. Like,
Yeah.
not that it's any less valid or, amazing, but it's like there's a difference in like millions of people are waiting to see how you describe your faith.
Yeah.
Like,
And how do they live out their faith in the days and weeks and months ahead? And so I think maybe if anything, it's just, maybe just be more level-headed or even-handed about the situation, because we don't know. Like, I don't know the guy, and I only know based on what I've seen. And I think it would be just sort of maybe a little bit foolish to sort of jump quickly to one extreme or the other. And I think hopefully most Christians aren't too quick to go to one extreme or the other as well. And it's like, this is a journey that he's going to need to figure out. And hopefully he has, good guidance with him. Hopefully he's plugged into a local church. And there are people that can help disciple him through this. But yeah, it's like we don't need to make him a champion, and we don't need to hold him with absolute skepticism. I think there can be a middle ground there, just as we talk about him, or just see where this goes.
yeah, and I feel like the other component that needs to be mentioned is like there is a cloud sort of over some of this. There's over his own reputation of like he is being accused by multiple people for like sexual assault, rape, and harassment. Like, and again, he himself has like fervently denied that, and like he hasn't been convicted of anything. So like, we don't need to wade into that, but I do think another thing as Christians I feel like we need to be careful to avoid is like as soon as someone becomes like they're on our team now, then we just sort of overlook, like we sort of turn a blind eye to stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Even if, hey, this is totally legitimate and he has his life change, like there are still things about those accusations that like at the bare minimum need to be like seriously vetted and investigated, and like
Sure.
not just like, well, he's one of us, so like it's water under the bridge. Like there's more to it than that. I feel like
For
as
sure.
a church we have a greater responsibility for some of that. But hey, let us know what you guys think. Again, I don't necessarily like follow him, like his thoughts. Like I know he'll pop up now and then, like when he makes the rounds on like the social media, like the night show talk shows and stuff, and like. Yeah, he's an interesting guy. I don't think I agree with everything he says, but it will be interesting to see a guy that is quite thoughtful and like pretty well articulate if this is sort of the journey that he is now on. But speaking of another journey that some of us may sometimes take, that is the journey to the movie theater to catch whatever new flicks are out this week, which leads us to the next segment of this episode. We have Out Now and Coming Soon.
So as you know, based on basically the first half of the show, there's a movie called Unsung Heroes that is out now. I think I saw a headline that it was like number 2 in the box office. I guess that was for opening weekend. I didn't read the article. I just saw the headline. So I'm one of those people. But you had favorable feelings about this show. You've done a whole review on it.
This movie won me over because like even going back to last episode, like I wasn't super excited about it. Like,
yeah.
And then like, starting off with this gospel short thing, like kind of this, like, I was sort of grumpy when this movie started. And it's almost like, hey, I feel like I go into every movie, like, I hope this is good, and then like, if it's not, then it's not. But like, I don't feel like I ever go into a movie being like, I hope this is bad. Like, but like, I feel like I had to work through the fact that like partway through, it's like, you know what, I'm actually enjoying this movie. Like, this is a good movie. I think it does a lot of things well. I think it does, as you can check out my full review, it does have some of the tendencies of like, like a lot of swelling music in the background and heart tugs and like just some stuff that I feel like a lot of faith-based films do. But it definitely is sort of another sign of like, we've come so far. Like these are good stories, not just like, I agree with it because it was made by Christians. So, and it seems like even just from the comments and like the review and stuff, like it seems like that seems to be the sentiment of like I've heard from lots of people that weren't necessarily super excited about this movie or all that aware, and were sort of like won over by like, hey, it's actually a really good movie.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you guys go check it out.
Yeah. Well, and we've also, speaking of faith-based films, another one coming up. These things are happening almost on the weekly now at this point. But there's a movie called Sight.
Yeah,
coming out.
the new.
Are you going to see that?
I am. So that's actually this is like the newest by Angel Studios, who's they've been cranking out stuff, a lot of films lately, kind of about a doctor that comes over and like kind of cures blindness, and looks like an interesting story. It looks like at least from the trailers, a well-made movie. I think this one comes out in 2 weeks. I had the opportunity I've been sent it. I haven't watched it yet, so we'll probably have the review out early for that, so keep your eyes open. But I am excited about this movie.
Another movie that I think you are probably excited for is your favorite actor, Ryan Gosling, is starring in another movie.
Well, I'm not sure if he's my favorite. I just know that like I often just get told that we get mistaken for each other.
Oh, that's it. I forgot.
So I feel like there's some
your doppelganger is making another picture.
The
Fall Guy.
Speaking of getting around, he's been in a ton of movies.
Is he our generation's Harrison Ford? Because I feel like he kind of.
I don't know if he can do like.
I don't know if he does really.
Because I feel like Harrison Ford was never like the heartthrob. I mean, like he was, but like I don't think. I don't think he was like he did a lot of other like dramas and action. Like, I don't think you don't find him in a lot of like. He was like the pretty face and like the romantic.
That's true.
I do think
like, but I feel like that's maybe where he began. But now I feel like he's done a lot more like action movies. It seems like,
and he can do
like every other.
He can. Yeah,
movie is like
he's more than just a pretty face. Me and him again.
So are you, Daniel. So are you.
But I don't know about this movie. This is like one where he's like a stuntman and he's he's like in love with his director Emily Blunt, and it's a movie that I could either really hate this one or think like I feel like I should hate it. Like there's so much about it. It seems like I should not like this movie, but it kind of looks fun.
But it could work. It could work.
So I'm actually seeing that tomorrow. So we'll have the review out this weekend for that. But speaking of things coming up, we have the next segment of this podcast, which is things we like that you should like too. So this is my week to just share something that I like, and I thought I'd take a break from European power metal, at least for one episode before
Amen.
I get back to scraping the bottom of that barrel, and just share one of my favorite authors who, again, I think he's a lot of people's favorite author because he's one of the most prolific writers and influential right now. And that is Mr. Brandon Sanderson, a kind of fantasy sci-fi author. Really is like he's in the top tier as his books, New York Times bestseller, all of them, and just prolific. Like this guy, he cranks out multiple books a year. Like in COVID, when things shut down, like he finished the books he had scheduled, and then he wrote 4 new entirely complete novels like in his spare time. Like it's just kind of crazy how much he cranks out. He comes from like a Mormon background, so there is some interesting like religious themes and stuff that he kind of gets into and like, explores in his book, which I think Christians will find interesting. But he's super successful, and the crazy thing to me is like I don't think he's necessarily all that good of a writer. Like he's not like there's nothing about his like he's better than I am, but like nothing about like his prose and stuff blows you away. But I feel like he understands storytelling. Like he gets characters, he gets story arcs. Like just to hear him sort of do interviews and like talk about the process and like scripting things out is like sitting at the feet of a master. So he understands sort of what makes good stories work. So if you are one of the few that haven't tried out one of his novels, give Brandon Sanderson a try. So I know you've heard me share about.
Yeah,
Sanderson.
I am one of those few that haven't cracked a Sanderson book yet.
And I mean,
But-
there's lots of people that have. Like he's huge in like the fantasy sci-fi genre, but that's
Of
a
novels,
small
which-
piece
yeah.
of the pie of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
literature. If that's not your thing, but yeah, like deep world building. Like, he has a very distinctive style that maybe isn't for everyone. But he's one of those guys that like I've read like I think all the books he's ever done, which is a lot, and not a lot of them necessarily like blow you away that like, this is one of my favorite books, but like they're all just good. Like he's just one of the most consistent, and he sort of pushed me to shame about like
Just the quantity of
like
books
he
that
writes
he's
books
written.
faster than I write like articles or things. So again, if you guys are into sci-fi stuff, check it out. I started out with the Mistborn book, but the Stormlight Archives is like sort of his magnum opus. So definitely check that out. Anything else going on that we need to get into? This is.
I think we've covered quite a lot of ground today, and we'll be back next week to cover even more ground.
Yeah, so we hope you guys will join us again. We drop episodes every Thursday, and there always seems to just be a lot of stuff to dig into, to look at as Christians. So we hope you will join us next week for more conversations on faith and pop culture.